Welcome to everyone who's joining in with us today, guests and panelists. We have amassed an incredible array of knowledge and information for everybody today. So we're really, really lucky to have this wonderful group. My name's Lee Kumatat. I am the LightHouse Director of Communications for my sins. We're going to be having the main part of the panel where Frank Welty, who is our host, he will be introducing everybody. Then there'll be questions to the panel from Frank, and then we will open it up for questions from our guests. So that is enough from me. I'm going to hand it over to Frank. So Frank, you can introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Frank Welty. I am a senior accessible media and Braille specialist here at the LightHouse for the Blind and Visually Impaired in San Francisco. I've been with the LightHouse about 9 years now. And in my private life, I've been very active in the blind community for many years and very concerned about our voting rights and very, very much committed to exercising my right to a private and independent vote. And so I'm very excited to be participating in this discussion today. We have four very well experienced and distinguished panelists to present to us today about the issues around accessible voting in the United States in general and perhaps in California in particular. I'm going to introduce them in alphabetical order, and I will allow each of you panelists to give your 1 minute elevator speech about your background and your experience with accessible voting issues. So I'm going to start with Ardis Bazin.
Yes, I'm Ardis Bazin, and my company is Bazin Communications, and I work on a lot of accessibility issues and started with voting issues back in 2000 after I had moved to California. And I've been working on voting for a long time, and I even work with accessibility voting companies like Democracy Live.
Thank you, Ardis. And then our next guest is Michelle Bishop. So Michelle, tell us more about you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Bishop, and I'm the Voter Access and Engagement Manager at Ndrn, the National Disability Rights Network. So I'm coming to you all the way from the other coast. We're based in Washington, D.C. We're a national membership association for the federally mandated protection and advocacy organizations that do all types of disability rights work. And of course, Disability Rights California is part of our network as well. But all of our organizations like Disability Rights California are actually mandated through the Help America Vote Act to work on access to the vote for people with all types of disabilities, from the start of the process, from the time you decide you want to register to vote, all the way through successfully casting your ballot and getting your I voted sticker. So we do work on a broad range of issues, and I'm just excited to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Our next panelist is Eve Hill.
So I'm a disability rights lawyer for 150 years approximately, and I do a lot of work with the National Federation of the Blind. Very happy to do that. And a lot of our work lately has been in getting absentee balloting to be accessible for people with vision impairments and people with other print disabilities, because even though it's been the law that this has to happen for a long time, the states have been ignoring it, and suddenly it's very, very, very important that we be allowed to vote absentee. So I do a lot of different kinds of disability rights litigation and advice, but this has been a big part of my life for the past 6 months.
Thanks, Eve, and we'll finish up with Claire Stanley.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Claire Stanley. I'm the Advocacy and Outreach Specialist for the American Council of the Blind, so also all the way on the East Coast, but I'm actually from California originally, so fun to be here. ACV does a lot of work in the voting rights space. It's something we've been doing for years and we're really passionate about it, but kind of similar to what Eve said, because of this strange thing called COVID, we have now been working very significantly in the absentee voting space because voting looks very different as a result of the pandemic. But you name it, if it touches upon voting, we do advocacy for people who are blind and visually impaired.
Thank you. And so we're going to go through the body of our presentation today. It's going to be some questions that we've prepared for our panelists today. So we'll go through the questions and then we will have time at the end for audience questions. So we're going to get started. And first we're going to start at the beginning, of course. In order for us to vote, we must all be registered to vote. So how can blind voters determine our registration status and, if necessary, access the voter registration process? So I will start with Artis, because you're at the beginning of the alphabet, and also because I know you're local to California, so you might be able to have some state-specific comments on that.
Yes, if you want to check to see if you're registered, you can go to your county registrar's website. I know in Los Angeles County, it's lavote.org, or you can go to the Secretary of State website and there's a link to check to see if you're registered. You can also call your registrar's office as well. And
Thanks,
October
Artis.
19 is the deadline, so check as soon as possible.
That's good to know. All right, and Michelle, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I guess I would just add to that it's amazing that increasingly we can get that information online, right? You can go onto your state or local elections website and actually, in a lot of states, get registered to vote if you're not. But you'd also look yourself up, check your registration, make sure it's still current, because you also need to update your name or address if they've changed, and you can find your polling place, all those things. Some of those websites are really accessible. I've seen the San Francisco elections websites pretty darn good, and some of them not so much. So I always tell people, if you are trying to get this information or get registered online and it's just not working for you, don't hesitate to make your elections officials do some work. Call them up, ask them the questions that you have, ask them to send you the information that you need in a way that's accessible for you. And if those websites aren't cutting it for you, like, let them know, contact them, make them do the work. That's what they're there for.
And Eve, do you want, what would you like to add to that?
Well, yeah, a lot more of it is online, but there was a report just recently saying that a lot of those websites are not accessible. So I agree with Michelle, make them work. If the online process doesn't work, let your local registrar know, let your Secretary of State know, tell them it's not okay, that everybody else can do this 24/7 in their bunny slippers and you have to do something else, and call them. And then not only let them know, do whatever you need to register, it's really important, but then let your protection and advocacy know, let your local ACB chapter know, let your local NFB chapter know. Let all of us know, because it's not okay. And the election in November is very important, but it's not the last election we're going to have. And so we can keep working to get those things fixed even after November.
And Claire, what would you like to add about voter registration?
I think everybody touched on some great things. The one last thing, though, that I would add is that don't just assume you are registered if you voted in the last election. Still check, check, check. I've heard some silly, crazy things out there about somehow people getting dropped off, and we know how bureaucracy works. So even if, for instance, you voted in the primary and you say, I know I'm registered, it cannot hurt to check again. So just make sure you check before the November election.
Thanks. And so before we move on, I just want to add that just for everybody, I hope that you'll all make a little to-do list here coming out of this discussion today. And the first thing on the to-do list should be to check on your registration, because it would be a shame if you get to the polls and discover you weren't registered. We don't want that to happen. So do that right away. All right, now we're going to go more of a bird's eye view here and talk more about the voting access issues that we're dealing with around the country generally. So what are the primary voting access issues occurring around the country leading to this year's general election. And I'm going to start this time with Michelle.
Sure. And I think Eve hit the nail on the head real early that one of the primary issues we're working on right now is the accessibility of absentee voting and voting by mail. And it's, in my experience, exactly how she described it. It's something that was always required to be accessible by law, and it never was. And it just sort of flew under the radar for a really long time. And now that a whole bunch of non-disabled people want to vote by mail, all of a sudden how you're going to get your ballot in time and how you're going to get it back became really important. And it's really shining a light on the fact that these systems are not accessible to people with a large number of disabilities. And that's something that we really need to fix. There's been some fantastic litigation that's forced that issue in a number of states. I love it. But we're also thinking about in-person voting, because voting by mail is just not a great option for everyone. You should still be able to go and vote in person if that's what works best for you, or that's what you want to do. And we're really concerned that there are going to be a lot fewer polling places this year, because there are a lot of locations that are not willing to serve during the pandemic and can't necessarily, right? Like nursing homes were common polling places, and they have to protect their residents from the pandemic. So we're really concerned that your polling place might be in an unfamiliar location. It could be further away. So there's a little prep work to do there if you're planning on voting in person. It can be very safe. It doesn't have to be any more dangerous than going to the grocery store if you've got your hand sanitizer and your mask and you're ready to go. But you want to make sure you know where your polling place is this year, or if there are vote centers or other options for you, how you're going to get there. Is it going to be accessible? What type of technology are they going to have ready for you? And just really have made that plan to vote.
And I'll let the rest of you chime in on this in no particular order. So if either one of you want to chime in and add to what Michelle has already said about the issues that we're dealing with in voting access right now.
I know.
Go ahead.
Oh. I know another.
Claire? Yeah, go ahead, Claire.
Another thing that has kind of come to our thought process because of the lack of poll workers. We all know that a lot of times poll workers tend to be older individuals who have retired, and because of the COVID scare, a lot of them totally legitimately are not going to volunteer this year for health reasons. And so in some states and areas, there's a shortage of poll workers. And so one thing we at ACV have noted is that we're kind of nervous that because we have a lack of poll workers and potentially new poll workers, they're not going to be as familiar with accessible voting equipment. The story I always like to tell is during a couple elections ago before COVID, I went to vote, and this adorable older couple who were volunteering, I asked, oh, I need the accessible voting machine. And they bickered back and forth because they had no idea how it worked. And that was pre-COVID with experienced poll workers. And so what we're going to see now during COVID, I'm a little nervous that we're going to have even fewer people. And of course, during their training, they're supposed to know all that kind of stuff, but we live in the real world. So that's something to go early. If you have time, if you have multiple days to vote, go early so that you can really take your time, make sure you can tell people, you need your accommodations. Because if you go at, 8:59 on November 3rd, you might be dealing with some people who don't know how the accessible equipment works and things like that. So
I'd like to add to that too.
Thanks,
that
Artis.
advocate. If they claim the voting machine isn't working, ask them when you can come back that it's going to be working. Don't let them get by with making you use an inaccessible ballot. Just say, hey, I can come back tomorrow at such and such a time and I want it to be working. And make sure you push for that, because sometimes they like to right away give you the option to have somebody else do it for you. I've had that happen to me a couple of times. And you just have to really push them to do what they're supposed to do.
What I do when I have time is say, I'll wait.
Go ahead.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because half the time it's that they didn't plug it in.
I've done a lot of that, yes.
Yeah, this is Michelle. Same experience. I have also personally been denied use of the accessible voting machine. And as someone who fought for HAVA, it's really important to me to use that machine.
Yeah.
Me too.
Set it up correctly. I feel you. And I just wanted to say too, Claire said something that like really hit me. Like, we live in the real world, and we've already talked so much about like being prepared. Make sure you've thought of everything and you know what you need accessibility wise, and you're ready to advocate for yourself when you get to the polls and all that. And it shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't be like that. People with disabilities should not have to work that hard and be ready to advocate and do all these things that a lot of other voters don't have to prep when they go to vote. And I'm sorry that it is that way, but it is. So like, we still need you to do it and vote. Like, if we ever want it to change, we have to show up and we have to vote and we have to demand those accommodations that we're entitled to. And that's how we're going to see that kind of change. So I'm sorry it is that way. If you're thinking, it shouldn't be this much work, it really shouldn't. But you got to tap into that inner super bad advocate that really gets angry when you see inaccessibility and injustice, and make sure you cast that ballot no matter what.
And
One-
I wanted to break down the
Yeah,
absentee
yeah.
balloting piece just a little bit. There's a bunch of places where these things need to work, and they break down at various areas. So the application for your absentee ballot should be accessible. They should be able to deliver you an accessible electronic absentee ballot. You should be able to mark it. It should be accessible, and you should be able to mark it using your assistive technology. And you should be able to return it electronically. And in most places, they will not let you do that.
Mhm.
So we want to know about that. They have arguments about that, but they let the guy on the space station return the ballot electronically. They can do it for us too. And then the other thing that a lot of states now are doing is this nifty little ballot tracking device online. So you can look up where your ballot is. Has it made it to the post office? Has it made it to the election official? That should be accessible too. Again, more things we need to hear about if those are not working. Oh, and don't forget early voting. Those all still should be physically accessible, and they should have ballot marking devices there. So anybody who wants to vote early should be able to vote early.
Excellent. And oh, go ahead, Claire.
Sorry. Just to put two plugs in based off of what Michelle and Eve just said, if you guys, like Michelle said, plan ahead, make a strategy on what you're going to do to vote. And the National Coalition for Accessible Voting, or NCAV, have put together a plan. Let's see if I can get the wording right. Vote plan, I'm getting the word wrong. But anyway, it's a plan to help you figure out what you're gonna do to vote, specifically designed for people with disabilities. And it walks you through the whole process of deciding how you're gonna vote, what you need to do, what your options are. You can find that at ncavoting.org. That's ncavoting.org. Again, specifically made for people with disabilities. And then based off of what Eve said, if you guys have any stories about inaccessible voting, registration all the way through voting, soup to nuts, let us know at acb@voting@acb.org. You can shoot us an email.
All right, and just before I leave this subject of issues, and this is primarily for artists, but if other folks have things to add, feel free to jump in. And that is, are there any other issues relating to voting that are more California specific? Because I'm guessing that the majority of folks on this call are probably from California, not necessarily, but if any of you want to comment, if there are other things that are specific to us here in California that we should be aware of beyond what we've already talked about.
Well, all California counties should have accessible vote by mail, and they should be available starting on Monday, October 5. The accessible vote by mail is supposed to be available. And so if you don't know about where to get at that, make sure you contact your county registrar's office and get that information if you want to do the accessible vote by mail. If you don't, the polling place listings should also be available. I just saw an email go out today that mentioned all the links to where you could find your information. So if you don't have that, feel free to email me and I can make sure you get that email with all the links. And Frank has my information, so if you get in touch with him, he can give you my information. Or I can give it at the end of this presentation, either way.
Yeah. And I believe we're going to be sending out a resource list to those who've registered also. So that should be
That's
coming.
correct.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yes. I just want to add that first up, does anybody else have anything you want to add about California in particular?
I can throw something in there. This is Michelle. Disability
Michelle.
Rights California, which is the P&A in your state, has a voter assistance hotline. So if you run into any trouble when you're going to vote, especially on November 3rd, don't hesitate to give them a call, and they want to assist you. There's a lot we can do after election day to make sure the next election day is more accessible, but there's also a lot we can do on election day to make sure that you're able to cast your vote before the polls close, and that your voice is heard in this election. So don't hesitate to make that call if you have any questions or just need assistance, or you're having a problem at the polls. You can call on a cell phone from the polls. We're happy to kind of talk you through it and help you advocate.
Great. I want to add a couple comments here. One is for item number 2 on your to-do list coming out of this presentation is make sure you confirm the information about your polling place, because those things do move. You may have been going to that church on the corner for the last 20 years, but that doesn't guarantee that the voting booths are going to be there this time. Always check that out to find out where your polling place is. When I voted in this and for the spring primary, my voting place had moved, so that's important. All right, so let's move on. For my next question is, what states are handling voting excess particularly well, and what features set them apart? In other words, who are the models right now in terms of states that are really doing it well?
Well, I can jump in and start. We at ACB like to tout and talk about West Virginia because it's a state that we saw some great activity go down in. We worked with the Washington Lawyers Committee, which is a nonprofit firm in DC, as well as with the West Virginia P&A office, so Disability Rights West Virginia, to talk to the Secretary of State's office about how can we make absentee voting accessible for people with disabilities. And we went back and forth, and we thought we might have to file a lawsuit, knock on wood, but actually they ended up working with us, and they passed a law, S94, and passed a law in the state of West Virginia now that ensures the ability to vote accessibly via absentee ballot. And in many states, like in California, you can vote electronically and print it out. But in West Virginia, the language of the bill at this time is broad enough that when the technology gets there, it's not really quite there yet, but once the technology is potentially there, in West Virginia, you might even be able to submit your ballot electronically, which would be huge. So because of that, we like to talk about West Virginia because it's moving the needle far forward. So it's a pretty exciting state to look at. So if you guys are interested, look up S94 in the state of West Virginia.
That's great.
Doing a good job too, and it's unusual for me to hear about anybody who's doing a good job. I only hear about the ones that are not. The ones that we've sued and either gotten orders against or settled with, I hope are doing a good job, but I'm not willing to put my reputation behind it yet.
And that state was Idaho, right? There was a little audio glitch when you said
no,
it. Is that correct?
Delaware was.
Delaware
actually cared about doing it, so that's a big step in the right direction.
That's true.
Excellent.
And this is going to sound like a planned answer, but it's not. I think California does a pretty good job. One of the things I like about California is how participatory the process is, and that elections officials in California really talk to the disability rights community about making voting more accessible. Now, it doesn't mean that they're getting it right 100% of the time or in 100% of the state. I don't know if I trust anyone that much yet, but I like that they're really, not every state has elections officials who are so willing to open their doors and hear from the community and from different stakeholders. And to be honest, I really like the new VSAT voting system that Dean Logan created in LA County. I think it's one of the better attempts that I've ever seen to try to make a paper ballot fully accessible to people with all types of disabilities. It may not be perfect, but it's kind of several steps ahead of a lot of the other technologies that we're using. So I love that California is also a state that's willing to innovate and try new things.
Great.
I agree that California has done a good job. The only disagreement I would have with it is we did have to go through the legislative process twice in order for them to require accessible vote by mail, where some other states have been able to do it just through their Secretary of State's office. So the process was long with California, but I agree that, you know, they did listen to us and they did keep working with us until they got it right. So I really encourage states that don't have it to try first to work through the elections officials, because sometimes that's a faster way of doing it. But obviously not all states are going to allow that. So,
but that's something, as a legal matter, they can all do it through their Secretary of State. The Americans with Disabilities Act, through the Supremacy Clause of the Constitution, permits reasonable accommodations that violate state law. They do not have to change state law in order to do that. And while going through the legislature is fine, if that process is taken too long in order to get accessibility to voters, the Secretary of States can and must do it themselves.
So now that we've talked about the issues that we're dealing with in terms of accessibility and rights and so forth, I want to get now into some of the nuts and bolts. And so let's all together go through the steps that we each of us need to follow to successfully vote. And I want us to talk about it in each of those steps. What are our access rights related to each of those steps, and what are the actions that we need to be ready to take care of in order to get those rights. So, and we've touched on some of this stuff already, but let's just go step by step. So let's start with registration. Again, I think we've already established that we have the right to accessible registration. And we've talked a little bit about already that we need to contact our local voting officials to find out the procedure and make sure we have access. Is there anything we want to add in terms of what our rights are for registration and actions we can take to make sure we have access to that?
I know it's already been talked about, but I think those of us in the blind community will all nod and agree that website accessibility is the bane of our existence in 2020 and onward. So if the website where you register is not accessible, let us know. Like you said, contact your PNA, ACB, NFB, wherever, just let us know. And I can just never drive that home enough, because we all know website accessibility is a big issue.
All right, and how about the access issues and rights relating to, let's first take on the in-person voting, and then let's talk about mail voting. So in terms of our access rights and what we can do to make sure we have access, besides what we've talked about already, what can we add in terms of making our in-person voting experience accessible and successful?
Make sure you allow enough time when you set up your rides. Give yourself enough time, because it generally does take you longer when you're doing an audio ballot, and you want to allow yourself enough time because you might not be the first one to be able to use that system. Not all voting places have more than one system, and if you have 2 or 3 people in front of you, it might take some time. So make sure you allot that time when you're scheduling. I think that's probably the most important thing. And then, of course, advocating to make sure they get the machine working if it's not working already.
I would say, too, under federal law, you have the right to a private and an independent vote. But if you choose to, you also have the right to assistance, when you're voting. If that's something that makes the process a little more seamless or a little more comfortable for you, you have that right. Elections officials, poll workers can help you when you're at the polls. Typically they're going to give you like a bipartisan team. They're going to send a Democrat and a Republican with you to make sure everything's on the up and up. But you also, under federal law, have the right to bring anyone you choose with you. The only exceptions to that, it can't be your employer and it can't be your union rep. But other than that, there are no more limitations. That person doesn't have to also be voting. They don't have to be registered to vote. They don't have to be over the age of 18. They don't have to be a United States citizen. They don't have to be fluent in English, nothing. There's no restrictions. So if you want assistance and you want it to come from someone that you trust to help you mark your ballot, you have the right to that. Every so often we hear of overzealous poll workers who think they know the law, denying someone that assistance. So know that actually comes from the Voting Rights Act of 1965. You have that right.
You do, and you don't have to shout your choices across the room.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
You
Great.
also don't have to have them sign for you. I've had an instance where I went in with a driver and they wanted my driver to sign that my stuff was accurate. And I said, no, they don't know anything about me. They just brought me here. They don't have to sign anything.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so how about in the case of voting by mail? What are the things that we should be aware of in terms of what are our rights for voting via mail? What do we need to do to make sure that we get those rights taken care of in our mail voting?
Well, you have a bunch of rights to vote by mail. You have the right to have an accessible way of asking to vote by mail. You have a right to an accessible ballot. Unfortunately, not every state is complying with those rights. So I've personally sued, I've lost track, 10 or 12 between suits and advocacy, but that leaves X number, I can't even do math today, who I haven't sued, and some of them may be doing it right and some of them may not. So you have rights and they may be being violated, and you want to let them know, and you want to vote anyway, and then you want to let all of us know so that we can follow up with it and so that it doesn't happen again.
And make sure you sign your ballot envelope. That's the biggest problem in most people that vote by mail. They forget to sign the envelope. So make sure you have the correct envelope and make sure you sign it.
And to build off of that, I know I've heard, well, for instance, all states are very different, but I would assume, and artists, you might know this better, even within different counties in the state of California, where you sign can be different. I've heard some have tactile indications as to where to sign, where that's not always the case. In some states, I've heard they have sticker indicators to where you can sign for the blind. So do your homework and kind of know what you're going to be dealing with, because there are different ways of knowing where to sign, or for some of us who are blind, there might not be any indication. So unfortunately, you might have to get sighted assistance. So kind of make sure you do your due diligence with that kind of thing.
And we've advocated very strongly in the litigation that you should be able to sign anywhere. If they don't provide a tactile indicator of where you're supposed to sign, and even if they do, quite honestly, your signature should be accepted anywhere on the envelope. Now, again, I've only sued so many states, so it's not happening everywhere.
But that's the standard we can shoot for, though. Yeah.
Yep.
Great. So what resources do we have to get help for our voting? Like, is there a phone number we can call for voting assistance or voting access assistance?
Well, Michelle, most of your P&As are doing something.
Yeah.
Hi, yes, absolutely. So you can always call your P&A, and I did drop in the chat the number for Disability Rights California, assuming a bunch of you are Californians who could use that number. It's 888-569-7955. But there's also a lot of national hotlines you can call as well. The Election Protection Coalition has the 866 Our Vote, OURVOTE hotline. The cool thing about that is that they have an English hotline, but they also have a Spanish language hotline, an Arabic hotline, and then a hotline that has, I kid you not, like 9 different Asian languages. I can't even name them all. They also added the ability to text them, to chat with them through the website, and they partner with the National Association of the Deaf on a video chat hotline for speakers of ASL. There are so many ways to get in touch, whatever is going to work best for you. The cool thing about that is that it actually goes into a national database. All your data is private. Nobody knows that you called or what you called about, but it gives us the ability to say, we got this many calls about disability access or access for blind and low vision voters, and to get some data there. And often those calls actually do get routed to your PNA, or sometimes me. If you have a complicated enough issue, I'm literally like at the national headquarters, and sometimes they just pass it to me. So you might talk to me personally on election day if you call that hotline. There's also a new app, the Brink voter guide app that you can use. It's, from what I am told, supposed to be fully accessible. I don't do those assessments, so don't come for me. Let them know if you do find a problem with it, but it's an app you can download where you can get information in advance, like where's my polling place, what's on my ballot, but you can also use it to report if you have any challenges at the polls or see anything that's inaccessible. And I want to stress, we actually don't get enough calls from voters. And what I think is happening is that very often people with disabilities, when they go to vote, they run into things that aren't right, things that are inaccessible, things that are violations of the law. But so long as the poll workers find some kind of way to make it work, they kind of say good enough and go on with their day. I'd rather you call. You don't have to be completely denied the right to vote to call one of those hotlines. Call and report something that just wasn't okay. My favorite example is I once assisted a call where the polling place was not accessible for wheelchairs. It actually was. They just didn't know where the accessible door was on the side. The poll workers had
Same thing.
All the time, right? All the time. And so what the poll workers were doing when a guy in a wheelchair showed up was that they were lifting him in his wheelchair and carrying him up a grassy hillside, which is so dangerous, and a lawsuit waiting to happen, and just a terrible, terrible idea. The person who uses a wheelchair isn't the one who called. It was a random able-bodied person in line who was like, that seems wrong.
Right.
And that to me is like the definition of like what we do when we go to vote. Like the voter with a disability was like, those very nice poll workers made it work for me. And it's like, no, you did some stuff they should not be doing. Go call.
Yeah.
Call and let us know we want to help.
And I know that the ACB and NFB offices local offices and national, all take calls on election day and help with things like, this is how your machine works, and this is how you plug in the machine, and this is how it'll boot up, and here's how it works, all those kinds of things. And they keep records as well so that things can be followed up on.
Yeah, Eve took the words out of my mouth. At ACB, we're there. Now, of course, we're only open from 9 to 5 East Coast time. So don't call us at, 8:59, unfortunately. But we are there. We have all the resources. You can check our website out at acb.org/voting. And it has all of those different resources Michelle talked about. And again, contact us. I know where Michelle is. So if you're having issues, I can track her down. So definitely reach out to us.
She will. She will come.
And I'm assuming then that in a worst case scenario where the voting process just breaks down, that those same resources we're talking about are the places you can go to report that things did not work out, and to report problem or other problems.
Yes,
Yep.
but you also have the right to do a lot more. Under the Help America Vote Act, you can file a complaint with your state elections officials. If they violated HAVA, you can file a complaint with the Department of Justice. If they violated with the Americans with Disabilities Act, you can call amazing people like Eve and Sue, depending on what it is. So really, if there's something that dire that's happening, it needs to be fixed. And if you need to file a complaint or you need to bring some litigation to make it happen, there are folks who are willing to do that and to help you do that. Not to pitch PNAs again, just because that's my network, but they will help you also figure out what your best option is, right? Is this something that could be litigated, or is this something that needs to be DOJ complaint, and help you figure out where to start?
Well,
if
it's
not,
great that, oh, go ahead, Claire.
I was gonna say, if nothing else, if worst case scenario, something happens and you can't vote, do not let it go. Contact any of our organizations. We want to know. It's going to be reported. We're going to find a way to make sure it doesn't just fall to the wayside.
Yeah, because those supports are there to help us. So to finish off before we get into the community questions is obviously when this election is over, we'll still have work to do on our voting rights. So how can each of us get involved in working toward more accessible voting in the future?
First of all, get involved in your local election office. For example, get on your disability board. I'm on our local Los Angeles Voting with Accessibility Access Board, and I serve on that, and we have meetings throughout the year. So we talk about different accessibility issues as far as training, as far as how people vote, etc. And if you sign up for your local disability access group at your county, then you have even more ability to change what the system is doing currently. And they have those throughout the country. Some have less than others do. Ours has more of them throughout California, but not every county, even in California, has AVOX. So think about that.
You might be shocked to hear I have more aggressive things you can do to suggest. Sorry, that's who I am these days.
I like aggressive. Go
The
for
first
it.
one I would say is write to your local registrar and to the Secretary of State and your legislator and your governor. And I don't mean a form letter. If you can write a personal letter going, this is the crap that we're not going to put up with anymore and I'm coming for you, voting wise, not in any other way.
Yeah.
Join the ACB or the NFB or both and participate in their advocacy, which brings the power of the many together. Donate to your local protection and advocacy, your ACB chapter and your NFB chapter. Be a plaintiff. If things have happened to you, I would be happy to meet you and be your lawyer. And then write to the Justice Department and your local Attorney General and tell them the things that have happened and that you won't put up with it. And finally, and possibly the most effective, although the most difficult, run for office.
Thank you.
Think it yourself.
Does anyone want to add to that? That's a great list.
Just one more plug, I brought it up before, but the National Coalition for Accessible Voting, which all of our organizations are a member of, we're really trying to get out there, and we have acknowledged that we are not stopping in November because elections will continue on after that. So check out the website and reach out if you have any issues and let us know, because we definitely want to know, and we're going to continue to work on projects as well. So again, that's ncavoting.org.
Well,
And don't let it wait a year.
Yeah.
Deal with it now. You can take a week off and stew about it before you do something. But the faster we act, the faster we get things done.
Definitely. All right.
Strike while the iron's hot.
Already.
Yeah.
So let's get into our community questions, because I'm sure that as hard as we've tried, we haven't answered every question yet. So let's open up and hear some questions from our group today.
Go for it, Andrea, who's going to be calling on people.
Jim Barberer has a question. So Jim, I'm unmuting you. Go ahead.
Hi, Jim.
Good afternoon. I had questions about the mail-in votes in California. As I understand it, every registered voter in California will get a ballot in the mail, and you can fill out the ballot online, and then you have to print it and mail it back. To me, the biggest accessibility barrier here, other than the fact that we may not all have printers, and so we'll have to make documents and take them to UPS store or something to get them printed. The biggest accessibility barrier is that there's a number on the envelope that you have to access in order to do this. Have we figured out any way to make that access? Is there someone you can call? Is there some other way to get this information other than using some text scraping app to get it off of the envelope?
That's a great question. Do we have an answer for that?
No, Bob, the only thing you can do is save it in a PDF on a thumb drive and take it to your library to print it, or someplace else, or a friend's house to print it. I know the problem with going to a UPS store, sometimes they'll have to do it, and then of course it won't be a private vote any longer.
But are you saying you have to get a number off the envelope and rewrite it somewhere?
That's what Jim is saying, yes.
Is that true? That would be very problematic from a secrecy of the ballot.
Yeah, that's strange. I haven't heard that before.
I've never heard that before, ever.
No, I've just heard that you just print the PDF and you can put it on a thumb drive if you need to have it printed elsewhere. I've never heard anything about a specific number, unless it's a PR code on the printed sheet itself. I don't know.
And the envelopes, you do have to return them usually in the envelope that they send you.
Yes.
That is important.
That is what I understand, yeah.
But you shouldn't have to transfer anything from the envelope to the ballot, because those are supposed to get separated.
If there is something like that, I've never heard that, so I'm not sure if that's accurate, but if there is something like that, I think I did just see an announcement that IRA is doing some free minutes for voting related issues. So that might be something to check out.
That's good.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, yeah, so you could use IRA.
Shall we unmute Jim and see exactly where this number needs to be reproduced?
Yeah, maybe if you can give us a little more background, Jim, on that.
Are you there, Jim?
Okay, here he goes.
All right, just so everybody knows, if you are unmuted to ask a question and you mute yourself again, you won't be able to unmute. So something to keep in mind. What I have heard is that in order to identify yourself so that you can fill out the ballot online, there's a number on the envelope that you have to type in. I don't think I have like an authoritative source for that. It's just how I understand the process to work. If it doesn't work that way, I'm not sure how then my ballot is identified as my ballot. Maybe somebody can explain that, and we could go from there.
It does sound, though, like if that does turn out to be the case when we get our ballots next week, that it sounds like a lot of us should call our Disability Rights California and let them know that's going on. So I'm glad you brought that to our attention, Jim.
They're not supposed to identify your ballot as your ballot, because you are supposed to be able to vote confidentially. They can identify your envelope as
no, but I can track my ballot, right? And I guess you're right. It's not
the envelope you're tracking.
Yeah.
Okay.
We are having a couple of county-specific voting information sessions later or next week, one with San Francisco and one with Alameda County. So
we are?
Yes. So we will send out the information on those to people who have RSVP'd today as well, if you're interested. So maybe that will be clarified there.
Okay, our next question is from Jordan. Jordan, you are able to unmute yourself.
Jordan Miranda, and I heard that from CCB, California Council of the Blind, that you can get an accessible vote by mail, remote accessible vote by mail ballot. Each county, according to them, has one, but today I called my county officials at Riverside County Registrar of Voters, and they say they don't have any. What can I do? I have been denied.
So that doesn't surprise me, Jordan. We actually just had something similar in the state of Virginia, where we know because they worked with us, and yet the the people behind the phones don't know. So don't fear, you definitely have the right. It's just people aren't trained well and they don't know that it's available. So, I mean, the first thing is ask for, someone higher up and keep pushing it up the ladder, because it definitely exists. It's just poor training. If you have any further issues, reach out to any of us, and we can help, poke people. But if I were you, I would just continue to say I need to talk to someone higher up, because they clearly just don't know the information. And like I said, we have had so many calls in our office lately on that exact same issue.
Yep. And the other thing I would say is usually I go to the Secretary of State's website where it says that, and you ask the person on the phone to join you on that page of the Secretary of State's website so you can read it together.
And
There you
it
go.
does sound silly, but Claire is right. And I always tell people, if you're calling an elections office, don't ask your question to whoever picks up the phone, because they often don't know. I'll always say, ask for like the absentee department or something like that, and just keep escalating it if you can. Election laws are so complicated and so minute that sometimes, unless it's someone who really that's their thing, that they specialize in that for their county, they just may not know. It's common. And you can call that 888-569-7955 for assistance also.
Right.
800-769-7555.
888-569-7955. You're in California, right? That's Disability
Yes.
Rights California.
Yeah.
Yes.
They'll help, they can assist you as well.
Okay.
Great. Well, let's move on to another question.
Can I just interject with the dates and the times for the Alameda and San
Please.
Francisco?
Yes.
So Alameda County will be meeting with us on Monday, October the 5th at between 4 and 5, so at 4 p.m. And it's on a Zoom call. And for San Francisco County, it is the next day, Tuesday, the October the 6th. I'm sorry. I still struggle. I'm from the UK and Australia, and I still get my dates around the wrong way. I do try not to. Time is 4 to 5 p.m.
Excellent.
And if you want to register for those, you can register. We've got Serena Olson here from, so that's solson@lighthouse-sf.org.
Great. I think we can still squeeze in one or two more questions. So let's get another question really quick here.
Message is for Lynn, from Lynn. Lynn, I'm unmuting you right now. Go ahead.
Hi, Lynn.
Lynn on her iPhone. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
I'm Lynn Merrill, and I'm calling from Maine.
Lynn Merrill, yay!
Yay. All right.
I have to say first, my 3-year-old twin granddaughters are in the background and have been patiently playing quietly, but I can tell that the volcano is going to erupt any moment now. But I wanted to put Maine on the map. Effective today, we've made history in Maine in that we have accessible absentee ballots that we can complete online and that we can also resubmit electronically.
Wow.
We can also track our ballots. And this tracking system has been set up so that all voters in Maine, not only those requesting accessible ones, can track their absentee ballots. And this also affects the service members who are residents of Maine, who in the past, like the astronauts, can complete absentee electronic ballots. They now will also have the municipal ballots available to them. In the past, it was only the federal and state and county, not even the county, federal and state races that they could vote on. But because of the lawsuit in which I was a plaintiff, the municipal ballots will also be available. And we did this by filing a lawsuit in federal court against the Secretary of State and the city clerks. It was myself and 3 other plaintiffs. We requested absentee ballots from the city clerks in 4 different municipalities. We requested assistance from the Secretary of State and didn't receive a satisfactory answer. And this was in July, so we felt compelled to file a federal lawsuit in order to keep it moving quickly. And we've reached an interim agreement where, effective today, we have accessible absentee ballots that we will be able to submit electronically.
Well,
So I just
Linda,
wanted to put Maine on the map because
you did,
we're
Go
right up
Maine.
there.
and that what a
Right.
wonderful way to end the hour with that great news. I think you put. I think Maine has gone into the Accessibility Hall of Fame there. That's wonderful, and I think we should all shoot for that. Well,
Yeah.
thanks you to all of our panelists and to our participants for this hour, which went by way too fast. And I hope that you've all enjoyed it as much as I have. Again, we've got, for those who are local here in the Bay Area, we have our Alameda County Forum on Monday afternoon and our San Francisco County on Tuesday afternoon. And again, just to be clear that those are talking about the procedures for voting, not about the specific ballot issues, just so you know. But thanks again for all being there.
And can I just add something also,
Yes.
just very quickly? If you need a volunteer, if you're in the Bay Area and you would like to have a volunteer to help you with your voting, you can contact us at the Lighthouse. If you contact volunteer, hang on, let me just double check. Hold on. Yeah, volunteer at lighthouse-sf.org. And Alison, who runs that service, she will help you out with that. Ballots will begin to be mailed on October 5th. So look out for those as well.
All right.
Do you want to say just a little bit about how people can stay in touch with Lighthouse?
So for those of you who don't know how to stay in contact with Lighthouse, you're welcome to visit us online at www.lighthouse-sf.org. If you enjoy these panels, we're planning to hold more. If you've got any ideas, you can send them to us. I'm going to give you Andrea's email address because she's the best one at distributing this information. That's events at lighthouse-sf.org as well.
You can always follow us on social media, on the Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter.
We're everywhere.
And of course, we are also a nonprofit organization that is gratefully supported by your donations. So thank you.
We are. And thank you especially to our wonderful panelists. Really appreciate your time and your expertise, your wisdom, and all the information you shared with us. So thank you so much to everybody. And happy birthday to Eve. Hey, happy birthday,
My
Eve.
birthday with me.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.